I was 11 years old, standing in my cousin's basement in 1985, watching MTV, and specifically a guy in a comic book literally punch his way out of a sketch pad to grab a woman in a diner. I had no idea what rotoscoping was. I had no idea the song had already flopped once with a different video. All I knew was that a-ha's Take On Me, MTV's 3-minute animated daydream, made me feel like music could crawl off the screen and drag you somewhere else entirely. I rewound that tape until the tracking lines burned into the picture, and my aunt told me to stop ruining her VCR. I did not stop. That basement moment only existed because of a channel that almost didn't survive its first year. At 12:01 in the morning on August 1st, 1981, MTV launched with the words "Ladies and Gentlemen, Rock and Roll," spoken by co-creator John Lack. The channel was owned by Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment, a joint venture between Warner Communications and American Express, that was betting cable television could do for music what radio never quite managed. The first video was The Buggles' "Video Killed the Radio Star," a song that wasn't even new. It had come out back in 1979. The second was Pat Benatar's "You Better Run." Almost nobody watched either one because MTV launched on a single cable system in New Jersey, reaching only a few thousand households. Advertisers couldn't see an audience there, and the music industry saw a threat to record sales instead of an opportunity. If you'd asked someone in 1981 whether they wanted to watch a music video, they wouldn't have understood the question, because the phrase barely existed yet. 5 VJs, Mark Goodman, Alan Hunter, Martha Quinn, J.J. Jackson, and Nina Blackwood hosted the channel like Top 40 radio with a picture attached. The person who most clearly understood what the channel could become was Robert Pittman, MTV's first CEO and programming architect. Pittman had come out of radio and brought with him the conviction that MTV wasn't selling music. It was selling a feeling, a lifestyle, a demographic identity. He was the one who articulated the network's target viewer as the TV babies, a generation raised on television who processed the world visually before they processed it verbally. That framing shaped every editorial decision the channel made in its first 5 years. By most measures, it was still failing on the distribution side. MTV needed cable operators across the country to carry the channel, and cable operators simply weren't interested. So advertising legend George Lois came up with 3 words that saved the network: "I want my MTV." Lois had already transformed American visual culture through his iconic Esquire magazine covers throughout the 1960s, work that made him one of the most recognizable figures in advertising history. The catch was money. A real ad campaign needed about $10 million, and MTV only had 2. So MTV executive Les Garland called in a favor and convinced Mick Jagger to shout the line into a camera. Once Jagger said yes, David Bowie and Pete Townshend followed. The campaign launched on March 1st, 1982, and viewers started calling their cable providers, demanding the channel by name. Cable penetration climbed from 31% of the nation's television homes to 35% within a year, and nearly 40% by 1984. By the end of the decade, 59% of American households had cable, and network television viewership had dropped 15%. MTV didn't just survive, it rewired how an entire country watched television. And that shift is the real starting point for understanding what the 80s music video actually became. Once artists realized MTV could make or break a career, video budgets exploded. David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes had already set a benchmark in 1980 at $580,000. Duran Duran shot Hungry Like the Wolf on location in Sri Lanka, treating a 4-minute pop song like a short film, and Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart leaned just as hard into that same cinematic fog-drenched style. Duran Duran's follow-up, Wild Boys, cost $1.2 million in 1984. the most expensive video made up to that point. Directed by Russell Mulcahy, the Australian filmmaker whose fog machines and slow-motion water shots basically invented what people now think of as the classic MTV look. Then Michael Jackson called John Landis. Jackson had seen Landis' 1981 film An American Werewolf in London, a movie whose creature effects were created by makeup artist Rick Baker, who won the first ever Academy Award for makeup for that work, and wanted that same kind of practical horror filmmaking applied to a music video. What they produced was Thriller, a 14-minute mini-movie with a $1 million budget, more than it had cost to record the entire album. The choreography was created by Michael Peters, who co-choreographed the video with Jackson himself, and whose zombie dance sequences became the most imitated movement in pop culture history. The album was produced by Quincy Jones, who pushed Jackson to make the record as cinematically ambitious as possible, and the iconic red leather jacket worn by Jackson was designed by Deborah Nadoolman, who had previously designed costumes for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ola Ray co-starred as Jackson's girlfriend, her performance anchoring the horror film narrative that gave the video its feature film structure. It premiered at the Crest Theatre in Los Angeles on November 14, 1983, for a crowd that included Diana Ross, Warren Beatty, Prince, and Eddie Murphy. The audience gave it a standing ovation, and Eddie Murphy reportedly screamed for an encore until they played it again. When Thriller hit MTV on December 2, 1983, ratings jumped to 10 times the normal average every time it aired. It doubled album sales on its own. The Making of documentary, directed by Jerry Kramer, became the best-selling VHS tape of its era, and in 2009, Thriller became the first music video ever inducted into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry, described by the library as the most famous music video of all time. But that success has a shadow attached to it. MTV was under serious fire for barely playing black artists at all. In a 1983 interview, David Bowie asked the network point blank, on camera, why so few black musicians made it onto the channel. VJ. Mark Goodman fumbled through an answer about playing to towns in the Midwest that would supposedly be unsettled by an artist like Prince, and co-founder Les Garland later claimed there simply weren't enough black music videos being made, which wasn't true. That same year, Herbie Hancock's Rockit, directed by Godley and Cream and packed with robotic performance art, was one of the few exceptions that cracked the channel's rotation, winning 5 VMA awards and demonstrating that black artists were absolutely producing compelling visual content. What ultimately broke the barrier wide open was Billie Jean going into heavy rotation, reportedly after CBS Records threatened to pull every one of its artists off the network if MTV refused to play it. Bob Giraldi directed the video for Beat It and gave the network a second argument it couldn't ignore that same year. His streetwise choreography and cinematic staging making it impossible to dismiss as anything other than essential television. The ratings, not the executives, ended up making the case for inclusion. Here's the part worth sitting with. That basement where I watched Aha on a borrowed tape. I wasn't studying history. It was just the air I breathed. Madonna, Cyndi Lauper and Boy George turned androgynous looks, neon colours, and oversized accessories into the default style of every shopping mall in America. New slang entered everyone's vocabulary overnight. Media scholar Susan J. Douglas wrote in her book Listening In that MTV didn't just reflect the culture shifting, it manufactured the shift, and an entire generation became the raw material for that experiment. That visual arms race also built something nobody planned for, a direct pipeline from music videos straight into Hollywood. David Fincher directed more than 50 music videos in the 80s and 90s for Madonna, Aerosmith, Paula Abdul, Billy Idol, and the Rolling Stones, And he co-founded a production company called Propaganda Films, which helped launch the early careers of Michael Bay and Zack Snyder. Fellow Propaganda Films director Mark Romanek was cutting his teeth in that same building, shooting videos for 9 Inch Nails, Madonna and Johnny Cash that would go on to define the 90s chapter of this story. Spike Jonze went from music video straight into directing, being John Malkovich. Michel Gondry moved from video experimentation into eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. The 80s music video was basically a film school nobody had to apply to. The first MTV Video Music Awards aired September 14th, 1984 at Radio City Music Hall in New York, with performances from Madonna, Tina Turner and David Bowie. Former MTV promotions director John Sykes said the goal was a counterculture awards show that refused to follow the rules of the traditional ceremonies. 2 years later, at the September 14th, 1986 VMAs Take On Me, the video that rewired my 11-year-old brain pulled at 11 nominations and won 8 of them. Aha didn't even show up. They were playing a gig in Houston instead. 3,000 frames, hand-traced over 16 weeks, built that rotoscoped animation. The song had already failed once with a completely different video before any of that work began. The rotoscoped version became a rescue mission for both the single and Aha's debut album, Hunting High and Low, released on Warner Brothers Records in 1985. Sometimes the song is great the whole time, and the packaging is just wrong. MTV was the place where packaging became the entire point. By the late 80s, the cracks were showing. MTV started filling airtime with non-video programming aimed straight at teenagers. In 1987, it debuted Remote Control, its first original scripted show. And by 1992, The Real World had launched the network's long pivot toward reality television. Music videos got pushed into off-peak hours, and a sister channel called VH1 launched back in January 1985 as a softer companion for an older audience, started picking up the videos MTV no longer had time for. Madonna's Express Yourself set a new budget record in 1989 at $5 million, but the golden era was already cooling by then. Cultural critic Andrew Goodwin captured it well when he said MTV didn't kill the radio star, it made the whole idea of stardom something far more treacherous and far more addictive. Today, according to Nielsen, MTV's average viewer is in their early to mid-50s, about as far from a youth channel as a network can drift. I still think about that basement sometimes, the tracking lines on the VCR, a pencil sketch hand reaching out of a comic book and breaking the fourth wall before anyone knew that's what it was called. I didn't know I was watching the tail end of a revolution that had nearly died in a New Jersey cable box 4 years earlier. I just knew that for 3 minutes and 48 seconds, a Norwegian band I had never heard of made the real world feel like it had a seam you could peel back. That's the real story here. Not a channel, but a chain reaction that never really stopped her moving. My aunt's VCR never worked quite the same after that summer. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.